Have you ever found yourself lying next to your partner at night, listening to their breathing in the darkness, yet feeling as if you're on completely different planets? Maybe you're sitting across from each other at the dinner table. You hear the clink of their fork against the plate. You watch them scroll through their phone. The silence between you is so thick it presses against your chest. And in that moment you realize you've never felt more alone. Or perhaps you're both on the couch, watching a movie together. Your bodies are close, maybe even touching. But inside there's a distance so vast it makes you want to scream. You don't hate your partner. You're not angry. But the loneliness you feel, it's unspeakable. It's a quiet ache that never quite goes away. If this resonates with you, take a deep breath. Because in this video, we're going to talk about something that almost no one admits openly, the brutal, isolating truth about feeling completely alone while being in a relationship. And no, you're not broken. You're not a bad person. You're not too demanding or emotionally needy. According to Viktor Frankl, the renowned psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust and founded Logotherapy, this feeling is actually a message from the deepest part of your soul. It's pointing to something much more profound than just relationship problems. It's revealing who you truly are and what you're really capable of. Today, I'll show you 5 insights from Frankl's teachings that explain why you might be drowning in this painful loneliness, and what it really means about your inner strength and your capacity for meaning. Stay with me until the end, because if you've ever felt guilty about feeling disconnected, if you've ever wondered if something is fundamentally wrong with you, I'm going to help you understand that this guilt is actually a sign of your awakening, not your breaking. And before we dive deep, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Have you ever felt invisible in your own relationship? Have you ever questioned whether anyone truly sees you? I really want to know if you recognize yourself in this. Have you ever wondered why some people seem so effortlessly connected to their partners, laughing together, finishing each other's sentences, moving through life like they're dancing to the same rhythm, while you feel like you're speaking a language no one understands? Most people crave intimacy. They seek closeness, warmth, connection. They move toward their partners naturally, like water flowing downhill. When they feel lonely, they talk about it, and somehow, magically, things get better. They exist in relationships where presence feels easy, where being seen feels natural, where love doesn't require translation. But you function almost in the opposite way. You're not just experiencing occasional disconnection. You're living in a persistent state of emotional isolation, even when your partner is right there beside you. The loneliness isn't about physical distance, it's about something far more fundamental. It's about an invisible wall that stands between your soul and theirs, and no matter how hard you try to break through it, the wall remains. And here's the key insight. Feeling lonely in a relationship is not a social defect. It's not a sign that you're high maintenance or emotionally damaged. It's a direct expression of how your inner world is structured and what your soul desperately needs to survive. Viktor Frankl, who endured unimaginable suffering in Nazi concentration camps and still found meaning in the darkest human experience, taught us something revolutionary. Emotional disconnection isn't just about relationship dynamics. It's often a manifestation of what he called the existential vacuum, a deep, aching emptiness that arises when our lives lack genuine meaning and purpose. When you feel unheard, unseen, or unloved in your relationship, it's not just your ego talking. It's your soul, the core of who you are, signaling that something essential is missing. Something that goes beyond weekend date nights or better communication techniques. Frankl believed that we could survive almost any how if we had a clear why. But when that why disappears from a relationship, when the meaning evaporates, all that's left is two people existing side by side in quiet desperation. And here's what many people don't see. What looks like emotional withdrawal or neediness is often just self-protection. It's your psyche's way of saying, I can't keep giving myself to a void. I can't keep pouring my essence into a space where nothing returns. This isn't coldness. This is survival. First, let's talk about what emotional neglect really is. Because it doesn't always look like abuse. It doesn't announce itself with raised voices or cruel words. Emotional neglect is far more subtle, far more insidious. It's the slow erosion of your sense of self through sheer invisibility. Viktor Frankl spoke about the human need for recognition, not vanity or attention-seeking, but the fundamental need to be seen as a person who matters. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he described how even in concentration camps, the prisoners who maintained some sense of inner purpose, some feeling that their existence meant something, were more likely to survive. Those who felt completely invisible, completely without worth, often gave up. When you're in a relationship where your emotional needs are not acknowledged, something similar happens. You don't just feel neglected, you begin to feel like you're fading away. When your partner doesn't ask about your day, doesn't notice when you're struggling, doesn't recognize the thousand small ways you're drowning, you start to wonder if you even exist to them anymore. This isn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations of love. It's about the basic human need to be noticed. When you share something that matters to you and your partner responds with distraction or indifference, when you reach out for connection and encounter only absence, when your pain becomes invisible, that's when the existential wound opens. But here's what you need to understand: this isn't your fault. You're not too sensitive, or expecting too much. What you're experiencing is what Frankl would call a crisis of meaning. Your soul is asking, why am I here? What is the purpose of this relationship if I cease to exist within it? So when you're sitting at that dinner table, trying to tell your partner about something important, and you watch their eyes glaze over, when you see them check their phone mid-sentence, when your words seem to pass through them like they're made of air, what you feel in that moment isn't anger. It's a deep, primal fear. The fear of not mattering. The fear of being fundamentally alone even when you're not physically alone. And you know what? Recognizing this, feeling this, doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It means your soul is still fighting to be seen, still refusing to disappear quietly. And that takes more courage than most people will ever understand. Now let's talk about something even more painful, when you're not just invisible, but when your very existence seems to be a disappointment. Constant criticism doesn't look like abuse at first. It disguises itself as helpful feedback, or trying to make you better. But when it's relentless, when nothing you do is ever quite good enough, it becomes a suffocating force that slowly crushes your sense of self-worth. Frankl wrote about what he called the will to meaning, the innate human drive to find purpose and significance in our lives. But what happens when the person closest to you constantly signals that you're falling short? When every action is met with correction, every effort with critique, every vulnerability with judgment, you begin to lose touch with your own value. You start seeing yourself through their eyes, and in their eyes, you're always lacking something. Not successful enough, not attractive enough, not attentive enough, not present enough. The specific criticisms don't even matter anymore. What matters is the underlying message. You are not enough. Have you ever felt this? Have you ever found yourself walking on eggshells in your own relationship, carefully calculating every word and action to avoid the next criticism? Have you ever felt your chest tighten when you hear your partner's key in the door, wondering what you've done wrong this time? This is what Frankl would recognize as an existential wound, a deep injury to the core of who you are. Because when the person who's supposed to love you most treats your very being as something that needs constant correction, you start to question whether you deserve to be loved at all. And here's the truth that nobody talks about: when you encounter someone who actually sees your worth, who validates you, who makes you feel like you're finally enough just as you are, it feels like breathing for the first time in years. This isn't about infidelity or betrayal. This is about a soul drowning in criticism finally finding air. But listen to me carefully. You are not flawed for needing validation. You are not weak for craving recognition. Frankl taught that the search for meaning, for acknowledgement, for matching, this is the most human thing about us. It's not a character defect. It's the voice of your soul refusing to be silenced. This isn't about blame. It's about understanding. When criticism becomes the language of a relationship, meaning dies. And when meaning dies, the soul starts searching for it elsewhere. Not because you're disloyal, but because you're trying to survive. Let's go deeper into something most people are afraid to discuss openly: the death of physical intimacy, and what it reveals about emotional connection. Sex isn't just a physical act. Viktor Frankl understood this profoundly. He spoke about self-transcendence, the human capacity to reach beyond ourselves and connect with something greater. In relationships, sexual intimacy is one of the most powerful expressions of this transcendence. It's where two people move beyond their individual boundaries and merge into something larger than either of them alone. But what happens when that connection dies? What happens when the bedroom becomes a desert, when touch becomes rare, when desire feels like a distant memory? You don't just feel sexually rejected. You feel existentially rejected. Because when your partner no longer wants you in that way, it sends a message that cuts to the very core of your being. You are not desirable. You are not wanted. You do not matter in that primal, essential way. And here's what makes this so painful: you start questioning everything about yourself. What's wrong with me? When did I become so unattractive? Am I really that unlovable? You look in the mirror and see someone who has somehow failed at being wanted. Frankl would explain this through his understanding of meaning: when a fundamental aspect of human connection, the physical expression of love and desire, disappears from a relationship, it creates a void. And nature abhors a void. The human soul will always seek to fill that emptiness. So when someone else notices you, when someone's eyes light up when you walk into a room, when someone touches your arm and you feel that electric recognition that you're still a person who can be desired, it's not about sex. It's about reclaiming a part of yourself that you thought was dead. Do you know that feeling? That moment when you realize someone actually wants you, not out of obligation or duty, but with genuine desire? It's like waking up from a long, cold sleep. It's like remembering that you're still alive. But here's what you need to understand: you're not wrong for feeling this. You're not shallow or sex-obsessed. The need for physical intimacy is deeply intertwined with the need for emotional validation and existential meaning. When your partner stops desiring you, a part of your soul starts to wither. And that's not something you can just get over, or stop being sensitive about. This is about the fundamental human need to be chosen, to be wanted, to matter in the most primal way. And when that need goes unmet for months or years, the loneliness becomes unbearable. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. Viktor Frankl often spoke about freedom and responsibility, the delicate balance between meeting our obligations and maintaining our authentic selves. But what happens when the balance tips too far? What happens when you become nothing but a role in someone else's life? Maybe you've become the provider, or the caretaker, or the responsible one. Your days are filled with duties, tasks, obligations. You wake up thinking about what needs to be done for everyone else. You go to sleep exhausted from being what everyone needs you to be. But somewhere in all of that, a question starts whispering in the dark: what about me? Who am I beyond these labels? This is what Frankl called the danger of losing yourself in functionality. When you exist only to serve roles, partner, parent, employee, you lose touch with your own essence. Your dreams get filed away as unrealistic. Your needs become selfish. Your desires turn into sources of guilt. And the loneliness that comes from this is particularly cruel. Because you're surrounded by people who need you, who depend on you, who would be lost without you. But you feel utterly alone. Because no one sees you. They only see what you do for them. Have you ever felt like you're performing your own life? Like you're watching yourself go through the motions from somewhere far away? Have you ever caught your reflection unexpectedly and thought, "Who is that person?" This disconnection from yourself creates a disconnection from everyone around you. Because when you don't know who you are anymore, how can you truly connect with another person? When you've shrunk yourself down to fit into the boxes others need you to fill, what's left to share? But here's the liberating truth: you don't have to lose yourself to love someone. You don't have to sacrifice your essence to be a good partner. Frankl taught that authentic existence requires honoring both our connections to others and our connection to ourselves. You can say no to what depletes you. You can say yes to what nourishes your soul. You can set boundaries without guilt. And when you start reclaiming yourself, when you begin to remember who you are beneath all the roles and responsibilities, something shifts. The loneliness doesn't disappear immediately, but it changes quality. Because you're no longer alone with a stranger, you're reconnecting with yourself. And that's where all healing begins. There's one more layer we need to explore, perhaps the most painful one. It's the loneliness that comes not from what's said, but from what's never said. The conversations that never happen. The feelings that remain forever unspoken. The truth that lives in the space between you, acknowledged by both but named by neither. Frankl believed that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. But what happens when that space becomes a chasm? When the distance between what you feel and what you can express becomes unbridgeable? You lie awake at 3 a.m, having entire conversations in your head, conversations you'll never actually have. You rehearse what you'd say if you were brave enough, if you thought they'd really hear you, if you believed it would make any difference. But you know it won't. So you stay silent. And the silence screams. This is perhaps the loneliest place of all. Because you're not just isolated from your partner, you're isolated from your own truth. You're living in a relationship where the most important things can never be spoken, where authenticity has become too dangerous, where honesty might destroy the fragile peace you've managed to maintain. Have you ever lain next to someone in the dark, feeling words pile up in your throat, knowing you'll swallow them all again? Have you ever felt your heart racing with things you need to say, only to hear yourself making small talk instead? Frankl would say this is a crisis of authenticity. When we cannot speak our truth, when we cannot live in alignment with our inner reality, we create an existential split. Part of us exists in the relationship, going through the motions. Another part of us lives in a shadow world of unspoken feelings and suppressed needs. And the tragedy is this: your partner might have no idea. They might think everything is fine. They might believe you're happy. Because you've become so skilled at pretending, so practiced at hiding, that even you sometimes forget what your real feelings are. But your soul remembers. Your body remembers. That's why you feel that tightness in your chest. That's why you sometimes can't breathe for no apparent reason. That's why you feel lonely even when you're not alone. Because the person you're most disconnected from isn't your partner, it's yourself. And you know what? This isn't sustainable. Frankl taught that we can endure any how if we have a clear why. But when we lose our connection to our own truth, when we can no longer access our authentic self, we lose our why. And that's when the existential vacuum becomes unbearable. Now let me paint you a picture. Imagine a person standing in a crowded room. People move around them, through them almost. Conversations happen nearby, laughter echoes, life unfolds in all its messy beauty. But this person, they're like a ghost. Present but unseen. Existing but unacknowledged. They reach out, and their hand passes through everything. They speak, and the sound doesn't carry. They cry, and no one turns around. This is the archetype of the invisible one. And if you've been feeling lonely in your relationship, you know this person intimately. Because this person is you. The invisible one isn't someone who chose isolation. They didn't decide to become a ghost. It happened gradually, imperceptibly. One day they were fully present, fully seen, fully alive in another person's eyes. And then, through 1,000 small moments of not being noticed, not being heard, not being valued, they started to fade. Not all at once. Just a little at a time. Until one day they looked in the mirror and barely recognized themselves. Viktor Frankl would understand this archetype deeply. In the concentration camps, he witnessed what happened to people who lost their sense of meaning, who felt they no longer mattered to anyone. Many of them simply gave up. But others found a way to hold on to something essential, some inner light that refused to be extinguished even in the darkest circumstances. The invisible one is living this same struggle, just in a different context. They're fighting to maintain their sense of self in an environment that constantly signals they don't matter. They're trying to keep their inner light burning when every day brings more evidence that no one sees it, no one values it, no one even notices when it flickers. And here's what makes this archetype so powerful. The invisible one isn't weak. They're enduring something that would break most people. Every day they wake up and choose to keep existing in a space where their existence isn't acknowledged. That takes a strength most people will never understand. But there's a danger here too. Because the invisible one can become so skilled at being invisible that they forget how to be seen. They can internalize the invisibility, start believing that maybe they really don't matter, maybe they really aren't worthy of being noticed. They begin to collude with their own erasure. If you feel this deeply, if you recognize yourself in the invisible one, then your soul is sending you a message. It's saying, I'm still here. I still matter. I still deserve to be seen. And that message, that refusal to completely disappear, is actually your greatest strength, not your weakness. The path forward begins when you realize that being invisible in someone else's eyes doesn't make you invisible in reality. You exist. You matter. You are real. And the first person who needs to truly see you, truly acknowledge you, truly recognize your worth, is yourself. Frankl taught that we can find meaning even in suffering, that we can discover purpose even in pain. The invisible one's journey is about exactly this, finding the courage to make yourself visible again, first to yourself, and then to the world. Not by becoming louder or more demanding, but by refusing to accept invisibility as your permanent state. And if you've felt this almost irresistible urge to be seen, to be heard, to matter to someone, then perhaps your inner invisible one is calling you. Calling you to step back into your own light. Calling you to remember that you were never meant to live in the shadows of someone else's indifference. Now that you understand what's been happening beneath the surface, the essential question arises. How do you find balance between the need for connection and the need to preserve yourself? How do you love someone without losing yourself? How do you stay in a relationship without becoming invisible? Frankl's wisdom teaches us that the path lies in what he called tragic optimism, the ability to maintain hope and find meaning even in difficult circumstances. But this isn't about toxic positivity or pretending everything is fine. It's about recognizing that you have choices, even when the situation feels hopeless. One polarity calls for connection, for staying, for trying to make it work. The other polarity calls for self-preservation, for boundaries, for honoring your own needs. The art lies in respecting both without sacrificing either. Here's how you can start. First, create rituals that protect your inner world. Maybe it's 15 minutes every morning before anyone else wakes up, just to sit with yourself and remember who you are. Maybe it's a weekly walk alone where you don't have to be anyone's partner or caretaker. You can just be you. Maybe it's journaling before bed, putting words to feelings that have no voice during the day. Second, practice what Frankl called self-distancing, the ability to step back and observe your situation with some objectivity. When you feel that crushing loneliness, ask yourself, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What need is going unmet? What part of me is crying out for attention? This isn't about fixing anything immediately. It's about listening. Third, start speaking your truth in small ways. Not big confrontations or dramatic declarations. Just small moments of honesty. I feel disconnected from you today. I miss feeling close to you. I need something I'm not getting. These aren't accusations. They're offerings of truth. And most importantly, hear this clearly, you don't have to justify your needs to anyone. You don't have to convince someone that you deserve to be seen, heard, valued. If you have to beg for basic emotional recognition, you're not in a relationship, you're in a performance where you've been cast as the invisible one. Frankl said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. This doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. It means recognizing where your true power lies, in your ability to choose yourself, to honor yourself, to refuse to abandon yourself even when someone else has. Let me share with you 6 truths that Viktor Frankl's wisdom reveals about your situation. Truths that might finally put words to what you've been feeling. First, you are probably far more sensitive to emotional absence than most people realize. Frankl said, "What is to give light must endure burning." You feel the absence of emotional connection so intensely because your capacity for connection runs so deep. When your partner is emotionally absent, when they're physically present but psychologically gone, you don't just notice it, you feel it in your bones. This isn't weakness. This is profound emotional intelligence. Your soul is attuned to connection in ways that most people never develop. Second, your psyche needs emotional nourishment the way your body needs food. Frankl understood that we have hierarchies of needs, but he added something crucial: the need for meaning supersedes almost everything else. When you're starving for emotional recognition, for validation, for being truly seen, it's not melodrama. It's a fundamental human need going unmet. And just like physical hunger, emotional starvation creates a desperation that drives people to seek nourishment wherever they can find it. Third, constant emotional neglect can alienate you from yourself. Frankl warned that when we live too long trying to fit into others' expectations, trying to be who they need us to be, we lose touch with our authentic self. The loneliness in your relationship isn't just about being disconnected from your partner, it's about being disconnected from yourself. Because to survive in an emotionally barren relationship, you had to bury parts of yourself. And now you don't even know who you are anymore. Fourth, the loneliness you feel may be activating old wounds you've been carrying. Frankl spoke about how present suffering often echoes past pain. Sometimes when your partner doesn't see you, it reopens every time you weren't seen as a child, every time you felt invisible, every time you learned that your needs didn't matter. This isn't just about your current relationship. It's about every moment in your life when you felt like you didn't exist to the people who were supposed to love you. Fifth, this withdrawal you feel, this pulling back, may be the beginning of something sacred, your journey back to yourself. Frankl called this the will to meaning, the drive to discover what truly matters. When everything else falls away, when you can no longer pretend, when the loneliness becomes unbearable, that's often when transformation begins. Not because you're broken, but because you're finally ready to confront the truth. And finally, the sixth truth: you are learning to listen to yourself. You're learning to say no without drowning in guilt. You're learning to recognize your own worth without needing someone else's validation. You're learning that your needs aren't burdens, your feelings aren't inconveniences, your very existence isn't something that requires constant justification. Because every time you've stayed silent when you wanted to speak, every time you've smiled when you wanted to cry, every time you've accepted crumbs when you deserved a feast, you abandoned yourself to live in someone else's comfort. And you finally understand, you can't live like that anymore. Perhaps you've already felt it while reading this. That strange sensation, almost like relief mixed with grief. That quiet, profound recognition when someone finally names what you've been carrying in silence for so long. Maybe it's a tightness in your chest that suddenly releases. Maybe it's tears that appear without warning. Maybe it's just a deep exhale, like you've been holding your breath for years and only now remembered how to breathe. And yes, believe this, the loneliness you've been experiencing, the disconnection you've been feeling, the emptiness that has haunted your relationship, it's not a personal failure. It's not evidence that you're too sensitive, too needy, too difficult. It's a reflection of something much deeper. It's your soul's desperate attempt to be heard, to be seen, to matter. If Viktor Frankl were sitting beside you right now, with that penetrating gaze of someone who survived the unsurvivable and still found meaning in human existence, he might lean forward and say this: "You're longing for connection, for genuine presence, for mattering to another human being. This isn't a weakness. This is the most human thing about you. This is your soul refusing to settle for anything less than authentic existence. And that courage, that refusal to accept emotional starvation as normal, that is where your transformation begins. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are not fundamentally unlovable. You are not too much for wanting to be seen. You are not too sensitive for feeling invisible. You are not too demanding for needing emotional connection. You are not too needy for wanting your partner to actually be present with you. What you are is this: you're a person who has been trying to survive in an emotionally arid landscape. You're someone who has been giving and giving and giving to a relationship that rarely gives back. You're a soul that has been screaming silently for so long that you've almost forgotten the sound of your own voice. But you remember now, don't you? The world will tell you to be grateful for what you have. The world will tell you that all relationships go through phases, that you're expecting too much, that nobody's perfect. But deep down, in that quiet place where your truth lives, you know something else. You know that you deserve more than emotional scraps. You know that love shouldn't feel like loneliness. You know that being with someone shouldn't make you feel more alone than being by yourself. Remember this: you are not selfish for protecting your soul. Your inner world deserves just as much care and attention as the outer world you give to everyone else. And if you've been searching for a way to feel truly seen, start by seeing yourself. Start by acknowledging your own pain, your own needs, your own worth. Frankl taught us that everything can be taken from a person but one thing, the last of human freedoms: to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. You have that freedom. Right now. In this moment. You can choose yourself. If something inside you stirred while reading this, if some part of you that has been silent for too long suddenly found its voice, then maybe, just maybe, you're ready for a new kind of truth. A truth that begins with acknowledging that you exist, that you matter, that your needs are valid. This message found you for a reason. Not by accident, but because your soul called out for it. Because somewhere deep inside, you knew there had to be more than this quiet desperation, this invisible suffering. So here's what I'm asking you to do, not out of impulse, but out of choice. Because when something touches the soul, the least we can do is let it continue resonating, both within us and through us to others who need to hear it. Write in the comments, "I am seen." Just those 3 words. Not for me, but for yourself. As a declaration. As a promise. As the first step toward making yourself visible again. Share this video with someone who might be feeling invisible in their own relationship. Not to fix them, but to let them know they're not alone in this struggle. Like, subscribe, and let's continue this conversation. Because healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when we finally find the courage to speak our truth and discover that others have been living the same truth in silence. You deserve to be seen. You always did.